Greetings to you from a strange place. I am currently out of town right now, but I wanted to make a really quick video because I got some stuff stirring around in my brain and it's pretty good. And I'm here. I don't have to look anything up. So let me just start blabbing to you about what's going on in my mind because a lot of the reason why I started this channel is because I keep getting like little insights like this, and I'm like, and another thing, and another thing, and it's like, I've got these little, I don't know, apologetic-y things. They're not really for the sake of non-believers necessarily, but for believers, just so that you don't get caught up in the arguments of the world about the Bible. And it feels like I have a million of them, but I forget them a lot. They just kind of accumulate and come out every once in a while. And so to be able to just like get them all out in a single um, place has been really, really nice. And just that it has the potential to help somebody else has been really, really nice. So one of those is just thinking about like all the different stories of the Bible. And I hope that I remember everything that I was going to say because I don't have my notebook or anything like that. But so like, um, let's just start with the very first thing that made me want to open this thing. So um, here's the deal: the Bible is either 100% true, or it's stories, fanciful stories, whatever adjective you want to give it. But if it is literature, it is the greatest work of ancient literature that has ever been and ever will be. And that's just that on that. Like, it's not a debate. These are your only two options. You don't get to just write it off. Anybody just doing one of these, the dismiss gesture for the Bible, is not to be taken seriously or trusted intellectually, because these are your two options. Like, and the reason why I say that, aside from the fact that that's obviously true, um, just on the basis of what I was saying in my previous video about how ancient literature should not even be readable after a certain amount of years. And we're still able to, yes, we get confused, but we're still able to glean majority of what the Bible says. And what we don't understand, we can look up, and we're instantly illuminated when we study anything from the ancient past, right? So, you can't do this with the Iliad. You can't do this with the Odyssey. You can't do this with Gilgamesh. You can't do this with anything else. Um, and so, yeah, for those, like, you could, like, experts can do those. The people with doctorates can do those. And then they come back and tell you how it's the greatest thing ever and just trust me on this. But you yourself can actually go and just with a simple Google search, some YouTube videos of some other enthusiasts, both learned and not, you can glean just as much information. So, I think about all these people that are going to scholars, they're going to school and they're being taught that, oh, we actually can't find evidence for this. And, it's all designed to sort of poke holes in the idea that that it's not true, or that it's all made up, whatever. And it's like, okay, explain why it's amazing now. Now explain. Fine, just let's whatever. Like, the way that the human mind, like, or just the way that when you're doing a flim flam, when you're trying to con people and you want them to focus on something in particular, you can, that the con man can, just using that sort of sleight of hand or whatever you want to call it, like, there's going to be something that they're going to not be able to gloss over. It's like, if you can sort of train yourself to go, okay, fine, but what's that over there? Like, they haven't tried to clean all that up because they're just trying to get you to focus. Like, I was just watching this show that my son was watching on TV on Netflix, and it's like a brain teaser show or whatever, or it's like about science and stuff. And like this particular episode was about, uh, you know, tricking the brain and like how you can get it to formulate certain concepts or whatever. And so they had this guy on there, and he was doing a card trick, and he I mean, it was cool because it was like he had five cards, and then it was like, okay, which cards were this, which cards were that, and then he was like, okay, I'm adding a blue card to the deck, and which one is the blue card? And then he's like, ha, surprise, gotcha. They're all blue cards except for this one. And he was showing like, he had red cards. You know how there's like a deck of red poker cards, and there'll be a deck of blue ones, like the pattern on the design on the outside. And so he showed the one, but he didn't show all of them. But he didn't, like, your brain just assumed that all of them were red. The rest of them were red after he showed you the one. And so he was explaining how it happened. And then the conclusion that he drew was like, you can't always trust your brain because your brain will synthesize information and it'll be wrong. And I was like, no, the conclusion that I draw is you can't trust other mofos because they will try to trick your brain into doing things like this thing, like, and this is a common thing that I hear. It's especially with like lying and stuff. It's like people go like, yeah, don't, that's, there's your lesson, like, don't just fall for any old scheme. It's like, no, the lesson remains that people be lying. Not that you can't trust your brain just because you fell for something. Oh, I fell for this. No, that person like instituted deceptive practices, and you fell victim to them doing that. Not I fell for something. Like, and I know there's this whole culture of like victim blaming, which is also stupid. It's kind of like, I don't know, the way that the human uh the flesh and just the human, like the way that we sort of figure out how to dodge so that we're never in the wrong, or that we never have to change our paradigm about, it's really strange. But you know, there's such a thing called victim blaming, which is typically like, if you have to give it a name like that, like that's probably you just not wanting to take accountability for stuff. But when there's a scenario where someone is lying and you fall for it, that to me is yes, that is actual victim blaming. But it's not um, a victim. The victim shouldn't be a class of person that should get its own name. It's just something that happens to you, and no one stays a victim forever. Like, so why are we calling it victim anything? Like, you're a victim for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes, for maybe sometimes for years, but like that's because you've been kidnapped. It's not because something happened to you 10 years ago and you still think about it. That should not be you. You should not be considering yourself a victim. Like, but anyways, that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, so the guy was saying like uh that, like, oh, your brain, you can't always rely on your brain. And so that, I don't know who, like, I don't want to accuse people of being sinister when they're not. But it's like, I got to accuse somebody. It's either you or the devil, because what even is that? So now uh, you carry that out to its end, and they try to do the same thing with the Bible, where it's like, well, your brain is going to try and make these things work, but it's not necessarily like, can we just all agree that it is way, 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 way easier for the devil and anyone that works for the devil to convince you that the Bible has been corrupted, that it's not, that people went in there and changed it, that it's not reliable, that it's not trustworthy, that it's written by men, blah blah blah. It's way easier for him to convince you of that than it is to actually do the things that he's trying to convince you of. Like, can we just agree? Like, I just watched a video of a guy that found this ancient, ancient, ancient copies of, text, Bible text that was like on silver that had been like flattened and rolled into a scroll, and they found it in like a tomb or something. It's like nobody is coming in and changing stuff in the Bible. Okay, just get over yourselves. It didn't happen. Hold on. All right. So anyway, so like no one can tell you when it happened, where. They just go, come on, come on. This no one's thought to change this book. Come on now, come on now, and they just say that to you a bunch until you cave and go, well, yeah, people do be changing stuff. That's all he can ever do. Like, please stop. It's not been changed. It's not. It hasn't been changed. Like, so let's just stop with that. No one is going in there and writing in, oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell men to love their wives as Christ loved the church. That's going to really. Nobody's going in and changing it and telling you to be a servant, be a slave, and leaving the part where Jesus died in front of everybody. No one's doing that. Okay. And then the other thing that someone brought up that I was like, that's so good. And it's just sitting there. Like, really, really look for the stuff that's just sitting there, because he just casually was like, okay, it's commonly known. No one is trying, the con men are not even trying to use this. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Say it with me. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Everyone knows who Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is. Everybody knows those are the authors of the Gospels. Okay. What a lot of people don't know, and they assume, is that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were all disciples. They were not. Only Matthew and John were disciples. Mark and Luke were not disciples. Why would you make up stories of people who, and say these people weren't disciples at all? Why wouldn't you make up gospels? Why wouldn't you have Matthew, Thomas? Remember doubting Thomas? Let's give him a spin-off book. Remember, let's give Judas a book. Like, yeah, he does have a book. It's not in the Bible. Like, Mary has a book. It's not in the Bible. So, why would you attribute two gospels of eyewitness accounts to two people who are admittedly not disciples? If you're trying to do this compelling, so people are trying to get you in the mind to see, like, see how easy it is that this could have been, misconstrued and this and that, just so that you'll drop the Bible and stop relying on it, because it's honestly much easier to convince people that way than to prove that it has ever been changed, which people have yet to do. So, um, and then the other thing is like to use the translation magic, the translation sorcery. And there are a few examples of that, but guess what? We know what the examples are. Do you know why we know the examples? Because we have so many bleeding manuscripts, and it's been copied down so many freaking times in so many freaking languages that we can see, oh, this is where that translator decided to do that. Oh, that's a little bit sketchy. That's that's a lot of liberties he's taking. And then you go, oh no, how many more other people have done that? How many people could do that? It's like, we've got the thing right there. What are you talking about? If it's been done, we wouldn't be able to know it. So just be careful of this whole sleight of hand. Not only the sleight of hand, but the idea that it's your brain that's at fault. Like, if you fall for something, it's like, oh, you thought that the Bible was there. Oh, that's okay. Like, our brains tend to just see what they want to see. Don't fall for that, because that's not your brain's problem. Your brain is doing its job. Somebody wants to go in and try to hack your brain and put in some faulty stuff in there and make your brain say, yeah, that checks out. That's not on you. It can never be on you. Okay. So, that tactic is annoying. So that's just about like whether the Bible is true or not. Okay. Let's just, and you see how much work they do on that. Meanwhile, the Quran is just sitting there. No scrutiny. the Bhagavad Gita, all these other things, zero scrutiny. Do these people even have, like, is there even a, I watched a thing about like Islamic studies, and how, um, only like Western universities even have like half of the level of scrutiny that the Bible has. We're in there with the fine tooth comb. We're in there with the double, uh, what is the thing? The monocles. Like, we're in there in that Bible, like going, I see a thing, whatever. It's like, oh, this one says he was 30 and this one says he was 32. Like, we're in there like that. Islam is like, the Islamic world itself is not even studying the Quran the way that we are, just because we're just used to that level of study of venerated books. It's like, well, let's open the book and study it. What's wrong with that? And the Islamic world is like, no, 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 that's not how you do that. you know. So anyway, so let's just cut all that out. Let's just say, okay, well, the Bible's not true. Don't even worry about it. Let's just, okay, let's let's examine it as literature. Let's compare it to all of the ancient works I'm talking about. And when I say ancient, I'm talking about stuff you found written on inside a sarcophagus in Egypt, because that's how old this stuff is. And that's how, and they're literally giving you names, dates, locations, times, seasons, who was there, who said what. Like, the Bible is detailed. And it doesn't surprise me that you're going in your archaeological study and you can't find the place and you can't find the whatever. The guy that found the scrolls, the old ancient scrolls, but in that was made in like silver that had been flattened, he was telling a story about how they found it, because most of the tombs, anything that is like a sacred tomb from antiquity, has been raided by somebody at some point in time. Like, anything that was valuable that was buried with anyone was raided. Well, guess what? They found one where the ceiling had fallen at some point. Like, and if it's in a tomb where no one goes in there and nothing gets disturbed, it just fell like a flat. It just fell. So some more time goes by. People think that's the floor. Now it's the floor. And then some little old kid comes by messing around, bothering the archaeological team. Some local kid, and he's sending him off to go do something, anything but just leave us alone. And he gets to dig, and guess what he finds? A completely, like, one of the last undisturbed tomb full of stuff that exists in that region. It's like, which is a total God thing. God does that stuff all the time. It's so, he does it all the time. He does it so much that it's almost boring. If you're a Christian, you hear these stories all the time. And it's not, oh, what a coincidence. It's always like this perfectly, like, it sounds like a coincidence when you first hear it. It's like, oh, well, we just happened to find the tomb that, but it's like the story itself is so, it's got this plausibility in this, but it's like God totally planned that. Like, when we're speaking of your brain finding patterns, when you hear something that is like, okay, that's like, you don't even have to know the science behind it. You're like, you've been living your life all day, every day, forever. And something happens that is like, that's not normal. That's not normal. You work in, whatever field, and you go, that's not normal. To anybody else, you go, okay, this is how things are able to hide. But this is also how testimonies and miracles uh, sort of spread, because um, God gets you to admit that something happened because you're not in that field. You're not in, the jewel business. You're not in the science field. And he gets you to spread some story. So now you can't say, well, how do you know that isn't made up? So you're spreading some story thinking it's just, there's nothing weird about it. And then somebody in that field goes, wait, what did you say? Now we find out that it's a miracle. That's how God knows, y'all. He knows you're going to be like, yeah, but you're going to try and talk yourselves out of it. That's why he wrote the Bible the way that he did. Like, if you don't even see that, the manner in which he wrote it, the medium is the message. Like, he did that because of y'all, because he knew what y'all were going to be like. So he made sure he could write that thing undisturbed for a long, long time. And then when y'all had something to say about it, and like, even if it's not, that's another thing that's just sitting there. God's like, also this, don't forget this. Okay. The Jewish feasts themselves, the Jewish tradition themselves, you can't say that that was made up. The Jews are practicing it. First of all, the Jews are alive. Riddle me that. All of these other civilizations that are gone, like, we should be reading about an ancient civilization that isn't here anymore. That's what the Bible should be. I bet you'd be more venerated then. But they're still here. That's ridiculous. These are people who have been actively, like, an extermination attempt has been actively, like, done to them multiple times throughout history. This isn't just the Aztecs, one and done. These people, like, I don't know, but that has happened to them multiple times, and they are still here, and they are practicing feasts that foretell Jesus. Like, we can debate whether that's true or not, but the fact is, it's in their traditions. He's in their traditions. So to say that the stuff didn't happen, explain now. Okay, fine. Now explain the traditions and why we are sacrificing lambs, uh, keeping them. I saw something else that was talking about how you get a spotless lamb and then you sacrifice it after 4 days. And what does the Bible say? For God, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. How many days between Israel's birth and Jesus's arrival? 4,000 years. And then 2,000 years since then, which brings it up to 6,000 years or 6 days. And guess what? Then you rest on the Sabbath day. So, whatever. Sit back with your popcorn, because God already knows. He's just let him cook, okay? So anyway, what was the thing I was going to say before that? I don't remember. But oh gosh, my thoughts are all scrambled. One, two, three. Hold on. Okay, so let me just. I was trying to go to the literature part, and then I got stopped. But what made me think about the literature, aside from the fact I feel like I brought this point up, was it the last video? I keep bringing this point up because it's true. And then when I was talking about Revelation, Revelation is an amazing work of literature. But the stories, like the story about the temple being the second temple being, like, um, dedicated, and there's a story about the second temple. They're in exile. They go back, and you know, basically ordained by God. There's, whoever is the king of Babylon at the time allows them to go back and start building this second temple. They build the second temple, and the the younger generation that built it, once it's done, it's just a celebration, and it's joy, and it's, they're shouting and they're praising God, right? And then the older generation that are seeing the second temple, they're wailing and crying because they remember the first temple that was built by Solomon, and they're seeing this one, and they're wailing and crying, and the cries and the praises are mingling, and it's so loud it can be heard from for miles, and no one can distinguish what's joy and what's sadness. Okay, that single-handedly is the greatest story in ancient literature, period. Just stop. Like, that is the greatest story. Like, these other ancient pieces of crap that people keep finding, like, no offense, okay, but I can't relate. Sorry. That is the most human, amazing. Either it really happened or it is the most written by who? Some prolific author of modern fiction from thousands of years ago. Like that's a modern story that I just told you. This the mingling of cry of joy and sorrow. That's not going to happen for thousands of years. Like I don't know if you understand literature, but it has to progress. There's certain things, there's certain trends, there's certain things that Shakespeare has to come along, and then Tetrarch has to come along, and you know these periods that they love to teach you about, the romantic period and the this and the Renaissance, and then we were working with shadow and light. They started realizing in paintings, like when people are alone it's sad. Okay, that has to happen, and they're so proud of it. In the year 1200, okay, somebody wrote the most one of the most compelling fictional, let's just say it's fictional. Somebody wrote one of the most compelling, like way before Proust and all of these people. Proust and his, and part of the reason why it's so hard for me to, or it's not hard, but I would sit through these classes, and we love English and we love innovations in English, and we love, I love Kafka. I love uh, these, because also when you're these really, really great authors, Edgar Allan Poe and all of these people, they sort of are able to encapsulate the time period, and they're almost better than historians at telling you what that was really like at that time, because they're either highlighting, I'm thinking about Edith Wharton, I'm thinking about uh, Faulkner, like those are like my favorite people, and that's kind of like my favorite period. So it's like I have an appreciation, but if we're going to move the Bible to fiction, then everybody's got to move out of the way, because that Bible, it doesn't make any sense for it to be able to capture the types of things that it was capturing thousands of years before parchment. Do you know what I'm saying? It doesn't make any sense. That story single-handedly, one of the first stories that I ever read when I picked up the Bible when I was like 17 and I started reading the Bible for myself, The Road to Emmaus, blew my mind. Blew my mind. Blew my mind. It was a movie. Not only was it like a movie, it was like a classic movie, um, like a classic. I don't even know action. I don't even know. And also, it was like the testimonies that I heard growing up in church about God, about Jesus. And I was like, oh, it's in the Bible. So that really, like, it solidified because of the way that it was told. So you grow up hearing these fanciful stories in church. This old lady in the hospital, this little girl that was alone in the woods, and Jesus comes and feeds her chocolate for 3 days or whatever. And a skeptic is going to sit and be like, and everybody's like, oh, praise the Lord, praise the Lord. And a skeptic's like, yeah, right, yeah, right, yeah, right. Well, that I grew up hearing those stories all the time. Like, guys, if you're a Christian and you grew up in church, I don't know what it is for 2020 or whatever, but I was growing up 80s, 90s, 2000s, the aughts, okay, you probably heard like at least a dozen bona fide, like compelling miracle stories a year. And we thought we were doing a bad job. We thought we were doing a terrible job as a church. But you would hear a miracle story from somebody that you knew, or somebody that knew someone that knew someone, at least 12 times. Somebody that had to get up in the church and tell the story. At least. So you're hearing that all the time. Uh, and you're sad that you're not, able to just lay hands on people as you're going down the street. You're like, I'm a Christian. Why can't I cast out demons? You're like sad. Meanwhile, the world is going around, and they're just like popping pills and spending and just sinking their funds into something that gives you like half okay. And you're like sad that you can't get people up out of wheelchairs. You're like, what kind of Christian am I? That's the kind of life that we live. We live a life, we have peace, we have joy, and then like we get a little bit depressed and we're like, oh no, what do we do? Like, it's like, we don't know what to do for you, sis. Like, that's our problems. That's what our problems are. Oh, no one came to see me. And, my pastor prayed for me and I felt better after that. Like, the level that normal people aren't getting. Yes, it's okay. I'm in I don't know, I'm an in law, my niece in law. Does that make sense? I'm in her room. She's like, can I leave my door open? I'm like, fine. Anyway, so I'm almost done though. But so yeah, uh, there's so much disconnect between, like, we think we're talking about the same thing a lot of the times, and there's such a chasm, like spiritually almost, between us and the rest of the world that we take for granted because we just live. Uh, we have a well that doesn't run dry. Now, if you want to take advantage of that, or if you want to continue to uh, live on what the world has to offer, like, nobody can stop you. But it's like, we do have access to a well that does not run dry. And even at our kind of most uh, sort of, I don't know if church period can be ranked, but I feel like we probably think like this is the most embarrassing church era, but we still have a leg up, honestly, uh, significantly. So, but anyway, so the story about the road to Emmaus, if you don't know it, it's like after Jesus dies on the cross, and then 3 days happens. 3 days later, there's this groundswell. It's like folks are saying he's not dead, and now there's a dog here. So there's the dog. He's pretty cute. He's a Jack Russell. Um, so so yeah. So after 3 days, which I have to see this footage. I have to see this footage. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Can you imagine being a Jesus follower or just like an enthusiast? And he dies on the cross. Maybe you didn't go down to the thing because you're like, that's way too depressing. You're like, I can't believe that. And then it's been 3 days and it's just somber and sad and whatever. And then starting at like 6 8, like, this is how you know this happened. Aside from the fact that it's been 2,000 years and people still can't get over it. Like, I just know, like, this is the kind of energy that propels these beliefs into perpetuity. Because can you imagine, it's like 10 in the morning or whatever, you're getting up and then you just start feeling the energy. You're like, something is going on, or somebody comes to tell you. They're like, people saying they saw him, that like, that's never happened. That never happened. Especially like someone just independently rising. We're not talking about, even if you went to the most like magical, you know, Jewish tradition Bible days. Let's say Elijah's walking around. Someone has to go get Elijah and bring him to the person you want him to raise. Anybody that could raise Jesus is dead. John the Baptist is dead. So somebody just up, like, it's like if it was anybody, it'd be him. But it's just like somebody hearing like, we saw him. So after 3 days, I'm just giving you the context. This isn't part of it, but and yet it is. So like everybody's like tripping, right? So there's these two guys and they're walking down the road. They're going to Emmaus, which is like near Jerusalem, okay? And they're talking about, like, you know, the whole thing, like what's going on. And then as they're talking, some guy just appears on the road. He's like, what are y'all talking about? What are you guys talking about? And they go, spoilers, Jesus, right? I mean, who else is it going to be? So he's like, what are you guys talking about? And I love their reaction. I love their reaction. They're like, What are we talking about? Have you been in a cave, sir? We're talking about, and so they start talking to Jesus about Jesus, right? And he's like, and Jesus, who is clearly in disguise, like he's partly in disguise, and also these could be people that never met him and never saw him or whatever. But he's got to be in disguise because even when you like see those accounts of him, like everybody knows, they're like, when it's Jesus. Like everybody goes, well, what do we look like? What does he look like? And it's like, you'll trust me, you'll know it. So he's like, what are you guys talking about? And they tell him, they're like, so they start talking about it. And then Jesus is arguing back, like, no, this was, don't you understand, like the scriptures? Like, this is what had to happen. And he starts explaining the scriptures to them, explaining prophecy to them, explaining all this stuff to them. And it gets to the part, then it gets to the part where they're walking and they start, and Jesus starts to go like he's going the opposite way. Like they get, I don't know, it's a road. Okay. So he starts going down a different road and they go, no, 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 come with us. Like, come eat with us or whatever. So Jesus is like, oh, okay. And so they get to wherever they're going and they sit down to eat. And then Jesus blesses the food and he like breaks the bread. And like it says, once he does that, their eyes are opened and then he disappears. And then they say, were our hearts not burning within us as he was talking? They're like, duh, we should have known that. And then obviously they go and they're spreading that story, right? When I read that story for the first time at like 17, 18 years old, I was like, that's a movie. That's a, like, and the reason why I was saying that's a movie, it's like, what I was saying is like that level of storytelling that gets you excited, that gets you, like, that's what Hollywood pays millions of, like, pays people millions of dollars to come up with, because it's so just like, it's emotional, it's this, it's that. And so, and then also, like I was saying, it sounds just like the um, testimonies that I grew up watching or listening to. It was in the exact same tradition. So I was like, oh, that absolutely happened, because I had heard reality before I read that. So for me, like, this was never in question at all whatsoever. I mean, it never was anyway, but it just never had a chance to be in question. This stuff is reality, and it's never not shown me a reason. It's never not shown to be anything different than that for me. So it's very easy for me to point out, like, when you have to really disregard reality a lot when you're trying to break these things down and dismiss them offhand. Like, just the fact that when you go down the list of scholars, and in reality there's nothing that is just 100% with no merit that exists. So when they're going, oh, well, what about Matthew? It's a little dodgy. Mark, Luke, John, yeah, no, it's all garbage. It's like, so this ancient book that was painstakingly written over thousands of years by authors that didn't know each other, uh, and kept together by everyone who ever came in contact with it, and translated faithfully by people who respected and venerated it, uh, and didn't want to, like, the ancient Jewish scholars, that was like, this is holy text to them. Why would they change stuff just willy nilly? This was a God that, when the guy reached out and tried to touch the freaking pole to the Ark of the Covenant, he died. What do you think they think is going to happen to them if they change a single thing to the law? Like, they can't go around changing the stuff like that. It was for the scribes to write this stuff down. When the priest went into the holy place and he was off, he was dropping dead, and they had to come drag him out. They're not changing the Old Testament, guys. This is not a group of people who is going to change the Old Testament for anything. They don't even understand half of it, obviously, because Jesus came down as a walking example of the whole freaking book, and they didn't even know. They don't even know what they're writing down. How would they know to change it into what? So, yeah, the idea that like the whole thing, they like none of it is valid to them. That's also like that's a red flag. Paul, his letters, I don't. He's probably not actually. That's probably not actually Paul. They just attributed his name to it. Okay, well, what about Luke and having a cameo in Paul's letters? Like the freaking Avengers, they're like having cameos in each other's stuff. Paul's going to Peter's house. Peter's talking about Paul's letters in his letter. Luke is like, Paul's like, shout out to Luke. Tell him and tell Luke to bring me my stuff. Oh no, this was written 300 years way after that. What? Oh, it was invented by the Catholic Church. What? Okay, let's go back to 1950 and see if anybody held the ideas that you're now espousing really loud about the Bible. Did anybody in 1950? Did anybody in 1800? We used to have written records of scholars from 1700, 1800 who are 200 years closer to the events than we are now. Let's see if any of them had this asinine idea that you have today in 2024. Like with, whatever. So, yeah, that's just me on a rant. And also, the other thing that I feel like that people are just overlooking is that they're looking at this on the basis of 2,000-year-old events. These are 2,000-year-old events. How do you know this stuff even happened? Okay, well, it has to be acknowledged that yes, no one can live their life off of 2,000-year-old events, which means that uh, it's got to be getting refreshed every generation for this to keep going on. Well, if Jesus is still alive, it stands to reason. If the Bible is saying that Jesus died, rose again, and is still alive and is coming back, it stands to reason that he has the ability to continue to appear to people. Well, if he's continuing to appear to people, if that were true, that he would continue to appear to people and still alive, do we have any records showing that people are seeing Jesus? Are you insane? Are you insane? That's all we have. That's all we have of people saying they saw Jesus. I listen to Christian testimonies pretty much exclusively. Like that has just become my entertainment. I watch maybe like 30 minutes to an hour of an actual fictional show every week. Tops. Unless it's like one of the like 3 shows left that are actually entertaining to me that come out, and when they come out I watch those, and when there's no season I don't watch those. I watch Christian testimonies. I don't think I've watched a Christian testimony twice unless I just really love it and I want to go back and revisit it. I watch a new one every single day. I watch multiple ones every single day. I probably watch 3 a day. Never seen the same one twice. Either they've died and they see Jesus appears to them, or they just become Christians and he appears to them spiritually and not in bodily form. But people get a sense, or they hear his voice. He is everywhere. He's everywhere. Everyone is seeing him. The reason why we have paintings of Jesus is because people are painting him. The I think the early church went through a time um, of I think they went through a time of depicting him, and then they went through a time of sort of destroying those depictions and saying that was idolatry, and then they went back to depicting him, and they were seeing him. And another like just kind of pet peeve thing about that, because people like to talk about, oh, the white Jesus picture, the white Jesus, like he doesn't look like that, he was from this region, blah blah blah, as if people are not after a certain point. Yes, I'm sure that people are making paintings of paintings. They're going by the common rendering of him, right? But there are paintings that from artists who say that they've seen him, and what I feel like people are overlooking from these pictures, like I've never seen. There's very few pictures of Jesus that I've seen that I feel like that's not really what he looks like. By and large, I feel like people are really um, artists have really captured him. It's not just that he's white. He doesn't look like a Chad, okay? Even when he's pale. He looks like what the Bible describes, like as far as, a man acquainted with many sorrows. He doesn't look like someone, if no one knew who Jesus was and you took that dude out of that painting and you brought him into real life, this would look like a dude that that kind of sticks to himself, don't got friends, maybe don't want friends, probably can't, somebody tries to strike up a conversation with him and they're like, okay, yeah, well, I guess I got to be going now. That's what he looks like in those paintings. He doesn't look like some white dude that would sell you a car. He had like, it's like people just look at like to just look at the skin tone and say that's not Jesus. That to me is like, and to me it doesn't really strike me as like a human thing. It strikes me as just like the devil being annoying and just getting people to like just, as best to just not even focus on Jesus at all. That's what you really need to do, because that ain't, Jesus didn't look like that. He's from the Mediterranean. You know what, just don't even worry about it. And then just like doing black Jesus, which is just inaccurate. So now he's just getting you to draw like an inaccurate thing. It's like he knows what Jesus looks like and he don't like seeing his face. So it's like, don't, you need to draw someone who just looks like Dante from down the street and call him Jesus, and that would make me feel better. That's what I feel like the devil is just making us do weird stuff, because he don't want to see Jesus' face on everything either. So, he wants us to do something inaccurate. It's something that doesn't even capture Jesus. It's like you can't just draw a black dude on a picture and then have him looking all strong and competent. It's like he didn't come here like that. Like he didn't come here like attracting eyes and with his whatever. The Bible says he had no beauty to attract us, and who knows what the beauty standards were back then. So, um, and even with the blonde hair, blue eyes, like if you look at, like I was reading when I read the Archco volume, there's some there's there's actual precedent for him being having blonde hair and blue eyes, favoring his mother, having his mother's features. So it's just like, yeah, I'm just ranting at this point. But see, is there anything else that I wanted to say about that? I feel like I said everything that I wanted to say in the moment. But yeah, so I was just thinking about that stuff, and yeah, y'all be blessed. Rapture Watch is back on, everybody. It's going down. There was like kind of like, a little bit of a swell like during um, what was it, like Passover, Easter type era, but I literally like, it's so tender for me, because if I start getting back into it, I do not need time crawling the way it was crawling last year anymore. So it's like I can't even get back into it unless it's just an emergency. Like um, so I wasn't really even planning on like getting back into anything until like, I was like, if I don't hear anything, but I was also like, if I don't hear anything by like September of this year, then I don't even know what we're gonna do. Like, it's just gonna have to be like live life until whatever. So, and I was getting back into that possibility. It's like, hey, maybe we're gonna grow old. Maybe this is just whatever. And then, uh, you know, the flagships, the flagship watcher accounts started really getting going. And there's been like the steady ones, the ones that are the current event ones, not necessarily like the Bible prophecy, Bible simple people. Like, um, I'm following them, but I wasn't like into it because I didn't just want to be into it every day. Like last year, that I like it was they were keeping me going, and this year I'm like, I just need to like focus on other stuff just to make time go faster, to be honest. And then the current event people were always keeping abreast, but I was like, I don't even want to look at that because there's always just one more current event after the next. It's really like it's honestly like when you're uh it's like last year was like if when you're going into labor, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm in labor, and you think this is it. Oh my gosh, I'm in labor, and you're like trying to get to the hospital. Like, can I make it in time to get to the hospital? Ugh. And then you get to the hospital, and it's just more waiting, and you're just waiting, and now you seem like you lived and died in this hospital waiting room. You did the paperwork, you're waiting, then they finally get you back to the room. Meanwhile, you're still in pain, you're going through all your stuff. Then they finally get you into a waiting room. You're like, thank God. And it just kind of feels like you're in a waiting room. And now you didn't contract it so many doggone times. Like, it's just like, just call me when something major happens. So that's what I feel like we're at now. It's just like, um, you're so used to saying the word contraction don't mean nothing now anymore. But you know you're having a baby for sure. Now it's just like unless it's a big ginormous whatever, like it's not even about that anymore. It's just like it's just a waiting game. Everything's a big ginormous whatever. So it's just like Israel's at war, election year, aliens, uh, draft. Is the draft coming back? This and that. It's like yeah, yeah, yeah. When she's gonna get here? Like now you're just it's a waiting game. So in the meantime, uh, the Ninth of Av has come back up, and it just since last year it's only just gotten more perfect. And the constellations and the stars in the sky, like now we've gotten more used to um, understanding what that is all about. Now that we've got a year of it under our belt, now it's like, okay, now really look at the sky. What are the signs? And now it's like, oh, it's wine, and it's the Gentile bride, it's Esther, it's this, it's that. It's like, okay, all right, all right, all right. Let's see what you got. August. So, yeah, August. And then the next big watch time after that is, I forget which feast I'm supposed to care about. Because I think it's Feast of Trumpets. I think that's the one. So I got my fingers crossed for August, I think. I mean, because that ninth of Av is when the first and second temples like got destroyed on that day, on the ninth of Av. And the temple imagery and us being the body of Christ, Jesus saying, destroy this temple and I'll raise it in 3 days. um, it seems to coincide with what happens to everyone who's remained alive until this time. So yeah. So, and honestly, if nothing happens this year, it's going to really disrupt the maths. So it's a matter of, do you think God will disrupt the maths, even though our math could be wrong, but we can still go by the stars in the sky. We really have no excuse with the technology that we have now to follow the constellations. And God, that's what God said to do. God said, I said the stars in the sky. I said there's going to be signs up there. He didn't really say anything about count all the days and the calendars and the Gregorian versus the whatever. So we know there's certain time things that we know for sure, like the destruction of the second temple and things that we can go by. So, and Israel being a nation for however many years, and that being in the scripture. Um, so it's high likelihood still, very much so. So, yeah, the only thing that remains is this whole business of not knowing the day or the hour, and is it even possible to know? Um, but with when you're within like seconds, do you know what I'm saying? Like it should be possible. When Jesus is talking about, because there's so many parables about that and about waiting, being ready because you never know when the master of the house is going to come home, and you need to be ready. He's going to delay. He's going to delay, but you need to be ready. I mean, think about that. For those parables have been able to hold the church in place for 2,000 years. If we're the generation that is supposed to leave, it's going to hit our ears different, uh, or it's going to be sort of less about that for us. Like if we need to know when it's time to get up and get ready to go, it's going to be different for us. So I feel like the previous generations, keep your head down, keep working, strive, uh, you know, be ready for the prize. And I feel like this generation has been like, don't miss the train, don't miss the train, don't miss the train, don't. It's like, okay, now it's time to get out of that and really start to look up. Like, y'all need to be looking up. So I feel like the whole energy is shifting. It's not about like, plant these trees for future generations, do these things for future generations. It's like, hey, when you see this and when you see that, when you see this, when you see that, don't miss the train. Like, you can feel when the energy starts to change, and you can see people sort of dividing in their camps, and people be like, no, it's fine. If nothing's coming, it's the same thing. It's always the same thing. It's like, Peter said you would say that. Oh my gosh. Like, so, yeah, it's just about being prepared and paying attention. And some of us is super paying attention. It's just like, and you feel the malaise. You see, you're like, it's just, and it's not just the last couple of years for a lot of people. A lot of people been watching for a generation at least. So yeah, while there's always, of course, you can write it off and dismiss it as, yeah, you're always trying to escape, you're always this, it's always that. You feel an earthquake, you think Jesus is coming back. There's a world war, you think Jesus is coming back. But it's just, you can't miss this. It's worth jumping at everything that you hear. It's like, yeah, you're waiting up for the master to get back, wait up for the master to get back. You ought to be able to hear. He's not going to sneak up on you like that. He's got horses. You know what I'm saying? You can't hear the horses outside. You can't hear the whatever. Like, you got to be like asleep and not paying attention to miss it. So, but if you're awake and you got your stuff ready for the master to come home, you're looking out the window, you're probably going to see some lights. You're probably going to see something coming towards you, you know. But I think Jesus knew that people tend to, because the parables are about, if the master knew, if the master of the house knew when the thief was coming, he would have stayed up. Or the guy that said, oh, well, my master's not coming home for a while. So he starts beating the servants and doing all of this stuff. It's like we tend to, when we feel like God's a long ways off, we get lazy, we get, um, we start to zone out, whatever. It's like, okay, well, those parts wasn't written for me, because you ain't got to worry about that for me. I'm watching. Um, so yeah, virgins falling asleep, etc., etc. So, anyways, uh, I said all that to say that it's watch time again, and exciting, but trying to keep expectations uh, realistic, I guess is the word. Don't want to say low, but yeah. So, and today's 4th of July, BT dubs. So we're going to do fireworks and whatnot. That's going to be fun. And yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Y'all be blessed, and happy 4th of July. And I will talk to y'all later. Bye.